from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, folks, it's RSA week. I hope you're ready for an awesome episode. We have so many of them coming, so please make sure to subscribe right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. If you're watching us on your favorite social media platform, whether it be LinkedIn, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, please make sure to follow our page. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, if you're on Apple, please now you get to follow podcast, apparently. Everywhere else, you get to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Joining me for today's episode, Nadir Izrael. He is the founder and CTO over at Armis. Nadir, happy RSA week, virtually.
Thank you. Happy RSA week to you and everyone watching as well.
It's weird to be doing this virtually. I'm like used to seeing people during RSA week. Were you at RSA last year?
I was. It was the last greatest security event right before COVID lockdown hit. Yep.
Yeah, it was surreal because they had so many hand sanitizing stations. Like everywhere you went, there was a hand sanitizing station.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in cyber. Obviously, the talk of the event is the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, where the folks over at Colonial paid, a $5 million ransom. And there's a lot of different talking points, which as a CISO, I kind of look at it and go, I'm not quick to rush to judgment of an organization because you never really know. But talk a little bit about what some of the facts that you've seen around Colonial and some of the conversations you guys have been having in the aftermath with some of the critical infrastructure clients you guys work with.
Sure. So first of all, you're right. I'm not quick to judge either. I honestly, I feel sorry for the people in that particular chair and having to make those decisions. And it's understandable. I mean, ultimately, there is business here and a very important and critical one at that to get back in play. But if we kind of think about what led up to this, it actually tells, I think, the story of an entire industry. It's not just them. I mean, ultimately, these are very critical and very vulnerable types of organizations, industries. A lot of the things and a lot of the environments that they have are pretty old. They're being network connected in rapid speed. Lots of different processes are driving that, and especially the whole idea of automation and digital transformation in these kinds of industries. Having said that, it obviously brings upon a world where if your billing system, for instance, is compromised, or if anything else, even in the IT infrastructure, you might end up having to shut down everything because you're so reliant on digital technology. And ultimately, I think that security classically in these areas has been lagging, not because anyone is at fault, but because these kinds of things take time to do a transformation. We obviously, to your point, have quite a few clients and quite a few organizations, be it in critical infrastructure or manufacturing or anything in between, who are asking themselves quite literally, how do I not become the next Colonial Pipeline? And there's a lot of answers to that, but ultimately it starts with understanding your environment, actually being able to prioritize risk and being able to do something, kind of make the necessary changes in the environment.
Ransomware is an extremely difficult cybersecurity challenge for a lot of organization because it's we always say they've got to be right once. We have to be right every single time in order for it not to happen. What are some real mitigations of ransomware in an event like what we saw at Colonial? And we've seen ransomware across many other critical infrastructures, especially in ICS. Is there what I love how a lot of people will say, if they only did this, is there a silver lining? Is there a silver bullet that stops all ransomware attacks for critical infrastructure?
Sadly, ransomware is a little bit like terrorism. I think in a way, it's a very, very low cost type of activity that can generate lots of damage, and there's a network effect, right? I mean, if everyone didn't pay, and this was a very low-yielding type of crime or act, then it will sort of die out as it is. But the reality is that a lot of organizations pay, and for good reason. I mean, ultimately, it's a small price to pay usually, and the perpetrators know that as well. I think that preventing it or stopping it from spreading is really the only type of things that an organization should invest in. And while I think governments around the world, and the US government in particular, is trying right now to enforce different forms of compliance and different forms of levels of security that are needed by organizations, it really boils down to the organizations and their own security apparatuses to be able to stop this. I think that a combination, and this is a very cliche set of statements, so I apologize, but ultimately, a combination of training folks and being able to run regular drills with people and expressing specifically just how important this form of attack is to prevent for an organization, alongside both perimeter defenses as well as the ability to stop before damage is severe. The last part, I think, in practical terms, is the most call it the most technology-driven one. I think that especially in ICS environments and OT environments, it's relatively, and I stress relatively, easier to find which systems and which areas within the environment and the network, both operationally as well as data-wise, are the most important to corner off and stop. And those areas are the ones that deserve the most attention. In most ICS environments, for instance, there are a bunch of different key systems in different sites. They're the ones to protect, and preventing spread of damage is the most important thing, because if you keep the damage to a minimum, or at least to the closest you can, restoration or restructuring operations and restoring from backups and things like that becomes a much, much easier and sizable task than if you have to deal with your entire network going down or entire set of systems.
So that's brilliant. You kind of brought up something that I think is often overlooked by many people who don't understand the ICS ITOT challenges that exist. A lot of our critical infrastructure network is old, right? And a lot of it is being modified and modernized, not through actual rip and replace, but rather through the addition of tools. And I think that creates one of the largest challenges for a lot of these organizations. How have you guys at Armis started to address that from a security perspective?
So good security starts from good planning and good visibility into the environment. And the visibility here is the key word. I know it's a word that's usually, I'd say, trivialized sometimes in our world, because you rush to the enforcement and the protection and all the other things. But visibility is really, really important. You have to understand what you have so you can start going through different efforts for both proactive risk management as well as reactive detect and response. So Armis really starts in the exact same manner. How do I visualize for an organization, or give them the means and the tools to figure out exactly what they have everywhere? IT, OT, IoT, IIoT, it doesn't matter which acronym fits here. It's an all or nothing game. It's a 0 to 1. What is everything I have? And then be able to prioritize, be able to stack rank according to risk or according to other things, and be able to understand out of my entire environment, where am I most vulnerable? What are the biggest holes or the biggest gaps or the biggest things that I need to lock down? After that, everything, I won't say it becomes easy, but it becomes more technical. Put up firewalls, put up segments, put up different enforcement mechanisms and different traps that you can sort of lock in and lock down when things start spreading. There are a lot of different enforcement tools, but they really start with being able to position them and being able to build out the correct security architecture to put together all of this. And you touched on one other thing, which is worth mentioning. In the world that we live in today, where digital transformation, even cloud transformation in many of these different environments, is a very real thing. And in many cases, security is used to these kinds of environments being completely disconnected, is used to air gapping, is used to lots of different mechanisms that are tried and true and used to work for 40 years. That's the challenge. The challenge is the business is no longer waiting. They're putting together all these different systems. They're hooking up everything into networks, and security is left to sort of lag behind and fill in the gaps as best as they can. So being proactive about this is really the most important piece here. So
very interesting. Talk a little bit about how you started Armis, because I'm very curious. You know, you're the founder and CTO of the company. You're obviously a significant subject matter expert on it. What was the passion behind getting the company started for you?
Well, I'm going to probably give you the least romanticized version of starting a startup that is in existence. First of all, myself and my co-founder, Evgeny, who's our CEO, both met in the Israeli military. So very cliche, I know, for an Israeli cybersecurity company. We were both in 8200, or kind of Israel's version of the NSA. And ultimately, when we started Armis, we did so by talking to CISOs, by talking to CIOs, to IT managers, to plant floor engineers, to pretty much anyone who would talk to us from previous lives. Evgeny was previously at a company called Adelon. He used to do a cloud security or CASB company that got bought up by Microsoft. And the reality is that lots of their different clients, lots of partners that we knew in the past, were all very talkative. I think that when you ask them, what's painful to you? What are the things that you can't sleep at night over? You get lots of different responses. But even back in 2015, one response seemed to dominate all of them. Everyone would tell us that they know exactly what to do about their laptops. They know exactly what to do about their servers, but they have no idea what to do about everything else. The security stack of the time, even today, was completely insufficient to be able to secure an environment with lots and lots of different devices, and diverse at that. But even more so, and that's the part that I think shocked me at least the most in the beginning, most enterprises in the world have no idea what devices and assets they even have. Even the basic visibility challenge of what's connected where, who owns what, all that stuff, no one knows. You ask a typical security organization, what's that IP address somewhere in Bangalore that just popped up a firewall alert? No idea. It might take them weeks to find out by talking to lots of different people in the process. Responding to an incident weeks after it popped up is a challenge, to say the least. So when we started Armis, we realized that we have got to be agentless. We have to build out a solution that's scalable across an entire enterprise without having to provision or place anything on any device. And secondly, a true security solution here would have to be able to deal with a large variety of different devices. So we have to find an approach that would be able to easily learn from different environments and adapt as things grow. Our response to that, and usually what plays a huge part in this, is actually leveraging all this data to the benefit of the security solution. So we chose a fairly straightforward approach these days, which is an anonymized crowdsourcing type approach, or a collective intelligence, if you will. When Armis today, 5.5 years later, monitors over 1 billion devices worldwide in more than 30 out of the 100 of the Fortune 100s, that gives Armis an incredible reach. Why wait for something to happen in your environment if something might happen in someone else's environment and you get the protection or get the extra identification or threat detection as a result? That's really what Armis is all about. And today it serves a multitude of different clients in different environments. And we feel that a lot of the assumptions that we made in the beginning panned out exceptionally well. So we've been fortunate to lock in, I think, on the right trend at the right time.
Brilliant. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare, because to me, healthcare is going through, I like to call it a digital renaissance. The last year, no need to mention anything that's happened in the last year. If you've been in a coma over the last year, thank you for waking up now. You haven't missed a thing. But that digital renaissance of healthcare is really changing the way healthcare organizations look at digitalization and digital transformation, another key buzzword, but also security. What are you guys seeing? What's some of the conversations you've been having?
First of all, I think if anyone needed a cynical view of the world during COVID, I think nothing expresses a cynicism better than attackers attacking hospitals and medical facilities and COVID manufacturing or COVID vaccine manufacturing facilities during a time of pandemic. But sadly, the world is filled with people who want to make a profit, even in situations like this. So sadly, side by side with all the digital transformation they're going through, they've also been going through a surge in attacks, and especially ransomware, which we've talked about before. They're the most targeted industry in the world. And the reason is that it's really very simple. I mean, if you're serving right now patients, you will pay. You will pay because you need your operation back up and running. You can see even everything going on with Ireland right now in their entire hospital system. That's exactly the kind of thing that hospitals, small and large, have been experiencing for a while now throughout COVID. I think that as a result, a few different things happened. First of all, security is at the forefront. If you wind our clocks back 3 years, for instance, security was not top of mind for most healthcare networks and most HTOs and most hospitals. It was something people thought about, but they never really gave it the time of day that it's given today. And the second thing is, to your point, lots of different things change in the landscape. It used to be a really, really simple network, a lot of detached devices, mostly wired, not even that much wireless. And the advent of telehealth and digital health in general has changed the world over the last year. I think more than ever before, you have patients sitting at their own homes, connecting with digitally connected medical devices and measuring instruments all the way to their doctor or their physician or their hospital and monitoring from afar. I think it ushered in a future which turned present, which probably would have happened years from now if it weren't for how COVID played out. And all of this is creating a perfect storm. I think that the IT infrastructure in most hospitals is going through a renaissance, to your point. A lot of different devices are getting introduced. There is no longer any such thing as a new medical device that comes in that is not network connected and even wireless connected. And it creates quite a few challenges. One of the challenges is security, but the other one is actually much simpler than that. Even simple things like asset tracking become a real problem for a hospital. You would not imagine how many times things like staff hiding crash carts in a closet because they need it for later, and hospitals generally losing equipment that goes into ambulances or it goes into other places. Just tracking assets in a digital world in this kind of environment becomes super difficult. But beyond that, understanding security and understanding even utilization, which is one of the opportunities that gets presented by all of this. Hospitals now have a way of measuring how well utilized all of their devices are. How many of them are actually being used? How much are they being used compared to other hospitals? I mean, lots of things that they couldn't answer before. So all of these together create, on the one hand, a huge opportunity and creates much more efficiency within hospitals, but on the other hand, creates a huge risk surface, an attack surface that sadly attackers are taking advantage of.
Yeah, the modernization, the asset management piece, I think is very fascinating, right? Because it's critical one too of security. If someone gets a hold of that asset, there's so much data within that one asset, whether it be on an ambulance or a patient that decided that he was going to walk away with it. People tend to almost, I don't want to say forget, but discount that challenge specifically for healthcare organizations.
Yep. I would say both data as well as the operational capacity of that device. If you hijack or put ransomware on an MRI machine that costs millions of dollars and is constantly in operation, the hospital will likely pay to get it back. And it's a sad reality of things, but ultimately that's how it works. This is a life-saving instrument, and regardless of even the data that's on it, operationally, it's hugely important to the hospital. So to your point, yes, both data as well as the operational capacity of the facility in question.
So as we're almost out of time for our interview, Nadir, I wanted to ask you kind of your predictions per se as to what do you think we're going to see that's really going to be transformational over the next year, and hopefully by next year in RSA you and I can have the same conversation and really look at last year to this year and see how accurate we were. What do you think?
Interesting. So a 1 year time span.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I think that we're seeing a very noticeable trend that as digital transformation and cloud transformation move forward, traditional agent-based solutions, I won't say are becoming irrelevant, but are starting to cover less and less of an environment. I think that in the following years, and even as early as next year, a lot of different technologies that mimic different stacks of tools that already exist in organizations have got to be agentless. In fact, I would say that some of the typical tools that we're used to in the form of EDRs, endpoint security, and endpoint management, and lots of these different things will have to have, if not an attachment, an entire different architecture that supports agentless, or ultimately go away. I think that it would be reasonable to expect that organizations, whether they have special environments or even just normal IT environments, will have a complete agentless stack of security, risk management, visibility tools side by side with agent-based tools. And it's just a reality of both how networks are evolving, as well as some of the needs of the hour and some of the things that they will be required to secure within their environment. So we're obviously a big push and a big part of the agentless side of things, but definitely feel that that's growing into its own element.
Brilliant. Nadir, how can people stay in touch with you?
Well, first of all, you guys are more than welcome to reach out over email or reach our website at armis.com. I'm happy to answer anyone's questions personally, as well as over any platform, any social platform you find me on. And yeah, reach out over our armis.com website.
Awesome. So armis.com, you can also look him up, Nadir Izrael, Izrael, I'm sorry, on LinkedIn. And you can connect with them there as well. Right, Nadir?
Yep.
You don't have do you have a Twitter handle by any chance?
I do not actually, but
okay, that's fine. That's great. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Extra bonus points in my playbook. All right.
Yep.
Brilliant. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into this episode with Armis. Thank you to Nadir for sharing so much insight with us in such a short period of time. I hope you took as much out of this as I did, because this was definitely insightful. Thank you to Nadir. Make sure to subscribe. More content coming out this week in virtual RSA. So make sure to go and follow the CyberHub CISO Talk podcast series. Until next time and until the next episode, folks, stay cyber safe. Cheers.
Thank you, James.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.